Okay, so in this video, we're talking about the stereotypical salesperson, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. Just imagine that nasty, typical used car salesman mentality, right? It's the commission breath, it's the desperate, it's the hard closing, it's the selfish intent. So I'm gonna be deep diving into this, okay? And comparing and contrasting between the stereotypical aggressive salesperson and the professional, okay? And this should also demonstrate how this type of salesperson can actually drastically outsell the hard closing, the aggressive type salesperson, because I've been on both sides of this, okay? And I can tell you this is the much better side to be on. All right, so let's start with the stereotypical salesperson. So first of all, they sell with confidence, okay? It comes from extrinsic motivation. The professional sells with conviction, which is intrinsic motivation, okay? It comes from within. So the confident salesperson just has a high ego, they know what they're talking about, whatever, right? The person that sells with conviction, right, the professional, they are actually truly sold on what they sell. They're not just doing it to make money, okay? The extrinsic motivations are to make a lot of money, to have free time, and to develop sales skills. Those are good things, they're not bad things, but it can't be the core motivator, right? So the true motivation should come from within. So we have another video that's on getting sold before you sell, okay? It talks about how it's the most important sale you'll ever make. So go watch that video if you want more on that. The stereotypical salesperson wants the deal to make a buck, all right? So selfish intent. All they can see, they're listening to the customer, but it's kind of just like all they can hear and see is, I want the deal to close, just sign here. They'll get an objection and they'll quickly go over it just to say resolve it and then try to close the deal, right? They don't really truly care. The professional salesperson wants the deal to serve the prospect, okay? They're thinking about what's in it for the prospect. WIFM, what's in it for me? That's what your prospect's thinking, and that's the station you need to tune into. It's a selfless mindset. The stereotypical salesperson talks too much. Okay? In other words, they seek to be understood by their prospect. Okay? The professional listens to the prospect and lets them do most of the talking. We'll explain that in the next part, which is the methodology of seeking first to understand. Okay? So seek first to understand, then seek to be understood. So the stereotypical salesperson also tries to sell by telling features and benefits, by telling. The professional asks questions and lets the prospect sell themselves. Also, on this point, the amateur salesperson will also try to tell things, right? The professional will not just ask questions, but they'll show. It's the principle of show, don't tell. The stereotypical salesperson is a hard closer, right? There's a few on this. Hard closing, repeatedly asking for the sale. So many sales trainers in books teach you that most sales are made after the 5th attempt to close. Okay, this holds less and less truth the more that time passes, okay? The successful salesperson builds enough value, asks the right questions, get them sold enough, teaches them enough, and clarifies and simplifies the options enough, builds enough pain enough where the prospect closes themselves by asking, so what's next? The amateur salesperson right here tries to close anyone and everyone. So this is coming from a scarcity mindset and poor training. Okay, imagine if you have 100 prospects that you have to present to in 5 days. You obviously don't have time to do that. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna disqualify a lot of them, and when some of them turn you down or it's not a fit, you're not trying to sell them or close them. You're saying, cool, no problem, I'm not worried about it, thank you. You're moving on to the next one, okay? So it's this scarcity mindset that they develop because they don't have enough prospects. Their pipeline's limited, and they become desperate and end up having commission breath, all right? The solution to this is the confident salesperson. You have to prospect a lot. We have videos on this, okay? You have to know your numbers. You have to have an abundant amount of leads. And when you have that and you genuinely want win-win situations, you're gonna be too busy and you're gonna have too many prospects, okay? You'll get momentum building and you care about your integrity. You do the right thing when it's not a true win-win situation, all right? So manipulation is when you create win-lose situations, and it can be done naively, okay, by accident. True integrous influence is when you create win-win situations, okay? You win, the company wins, the prospect wins. All right, the stereotypical salesperson uses sales tactics to manipulate. They create, again, win-lose situations. They try to, quote unquote, control the prospect. The professional salesman uses integrous influence. So your influence can be good or bad. Look at Hitler, look at Ronald Reagan. Influence is not a bad thing to have, it's just your intent. And it's not just the intent behind it, because you could have good intent and still screw somebody. So it's important that you know what you're doing and you listen to your prospect, you understand their situation before getting them into it. Now, the professional salesperson creates true win-win situations, and if it's not, they walk away. and they try to guide and teach. They don't see themselves as a closer. They see themselves as a coach and a teacher. The amateur salesperson here, the stereotypical, omits the quote unquote cons. Okay, they try to hide the catch. They're worried that if they tell the prospect the catch, they're gonna lose the deal. When really, that is actually one of the best ways you can leverage to build trust. Okay, transparency builds trust. So the more you are upfront about the potential cons, the easier it's gonna be for you to hedge objections and build trust with the prospect. Imagine somebody trying to sell you something new, like let's say a car, and they're just telling you all the good things, all the good things, all the good things, right? And there's no cons. It's like, okay, well, what's the catch? Especially if you're selling a product that they're not familiar with, okay? A car might not be the best example, but if you're selling a product like a software or solar, or they haven't done a ton of homework and you're telling them all these pros, it's gonna naturally register red flags. They're gonna see salesperson, stereotypical salesperson, they just want a commission, they're telling me all the good, so I've gotta do my research. So if you get the research objection a lot, it's because you're probably not being transparent enough. And this leads to the next point. The amateur overcomes objections and the professional hedges objections, okay? This salesperson is just waiting for the prospect to bring it up. The professional brings up the objection themselves. There has to be clarity. You're not just gonna bring up 100 objections to your prospect. There's usually 5, 6, or 7 core objections that most prospects buying certain products will typically have. You should know those in and out, and you should have multiple responses in very clear ways to demonstrate and overcome those, okay? And again, if you bring them up, you're not overcoming them. If you bring them up earlier, it's so much easier to overcome them, it's so much easier to address those than it is to address them at the end if your prospect brings them up. Again, there's another training video on that entirely. The amateur and stereotypical salesperson is disgruntled when the prospect does not buy. They get pissed off. You just wasted my time. Like I just spent all that energy, all that time building out a proposal, pitching you, meeting with you, and you're not buying. Like that sucks. And it does suck, okay? But they get in this negative mindset thinking about what's in it for them. Okay, it's my loss. The professional salesperson, the one that crushes it, feels genuine remorse for the prospect when they don't buy. Now, this has to be trained like a muscle in your mind, all right? When I was selling solar, when I made $500,000 in 2 months, this was the other year, I actually didn't track as much of my commissions as I did the net worth change for my clients. And in my situation, for my industry, it's usually 10 times what I make. Okay, so their net worth, the total 25-year savings, equity gains, tax credits, it's usually 10x or more of what I make. And so think of that. If they have $80,000 on the table and I have $8,000 on the table, if the deal doesn't go through, they don't buy, who's the bigger loser? It's not me. So I genuinely feel sorrow for them because they're walking away from something that could really change their life. Again, this is one of the biggest problems in the sales industry right now is amateurs and the stereotypical salespeople see themselves as a closer, as a hard closer. I'm a savage. The professionals see themselves as a teacher and a coach, your consultant, okay? There's no pride in being a hard closer, none. You should just get rid of that ego. It's stupid. Because if you're a true closer, you get people to say yes. I mean, think about that. You're creating win-lose situations. Not everybody's a perfect fit, and that's okay. You can compensate for that and still beat the guys that close everybody that are very talented by prospecting, by putting yourself in front of enough people, either through organic content, paid ads, or by just talking to enough people. There's ways around it where you don't have to become manipulative and pushy, aggressive, and desperate. You can still outsell those type of salespeople and be able to sleep at night.